Hi, this is Chris from Orange Coast College's Art Department. Today talking about adjustment layers in Adobe Photoshop for digital painters and illustrators. Let's dive right in and take a look at the layers palette. You can see I've got a background with this image and I've got a couple items on individual layers. Down on the bottom we have some buttons, and the middle button will give us access to adjustment layers. But before we get started, I want to give you a quick bit of context. If we take a look at the image menu and we go to adjustments, we have this same group of adjustments that can be made. And this is the way things have been in Photoshop for decades. If you make an adjustment here, it's a one-time adjustment that's permanent. And if you do it over and over again, it's going to degrade your image. That's fine if you're trying to make a quick hit on an image, hit the levels, save and be done, go for it, do it here. However, the great part about adjustment layers are you can return and edit your settings. They don't degrade the image, and you can turn them off and on easily. So let's see how they work. Here's our list, and right off the bat I just want to call your attention to there's only really three that I use regularly, and that's solid color, levels, and hue and saturation. I use levels the most, I'd say 70%, I'd say hue and saturation 10%, and solid color 20% of the time. All the rest of them, I pretty much never bother with them. Every once in a while curves, but go ahead and check out the video of levels and curves to really get to know the difference between those two. So for our example here, I'm going to go to the hue and saturation adjustment layer. And you'll notice my layers palette changed. It added a hue saturation adjustment layer above the layer I was on. I was on the orange bottom layer, and so it added it above it. This thumbnail is the symbol for hue and saturation, and this symbol here is the layer mask. It automatically puts in a mask with nothing masked, so it's solid white. To know more about layer masks, go ahead and check out our video that covers layer masks in depth. Also, you'll notice the properties pane has changed to give us the properties for this new layer, for this hue and saturation layer. So check out the video to know the details about hue and saturation. I just want to show an example of how adjustment layers work at this point. And so to show that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the saturation all the way down. And you'll notice in my example, it's changed it to pretty much a grayscale. Let's go ahead and maybe bring that up a little bit so you can see it's a real desaturated version. So first of all, you'll notice it hits everything. And that's because the adjustment layer is on the top of my layer stack. Now watch as I move it down. I'm going to move it below the orange bottom. So that means it's getting everything underneath the layer, but not the orange bottom. In this case, I'll move it down below the glass dome, and now it's getting the background and it's not getting either the orange bottom or the glass dome. Another thing, because it's a layer, I can turn the visibility on and off. So I can check and uncheck the visibility icon. So that's pretty nice. Now, let's go ahead and adjust the saturation all the way down, and you'll notice that we've got we're back to our grayscale background. Since it's below the orange bottom in glass dome, it's not affecting those. So another great part of having it as a layer is I can affect the opacity. So if I'm in a move or marquee tool, something like the rectangular marquee, I can affect the opacity just by hitting keys on my keyboard. So I can step this up. Watch, I'll hit 1, 2, 3, and if you look at the opacity, window here on our layer panels, you'll see it change 4, 5, 6. And you'll see as we go, the more opacity I apply to that layer, the more desaturation I get. And of course I can drop this down and just use our sliding scale. So just by adjusting the opacity of this layer, I can determine how much of that adjustment I want to actually apply. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and max it out. Now, what if I wanted it to apply it to just one layer? Well, I can go ahead and let's say we want to change just the orange bottom. So I'm going to drag it up above my orange bottom, and then I'm going to make a clipping group out of it. So to know more about clipping groups, and they're really important for digital painters and illustrators, go ahead and check out the video that deals strictly with clipping groups. But to give you the shortcut, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and then I'm going to click on the border between the orange bottom and hue and saturation. And what that's going to do is you'll notice it popped it over, it dropped this little arrow in. That tells me it's a clipping group, and it's only going to apply that adjustment layer to the layer below it, in this case the orange bottom. So it's turned that orange bottom to gray. Watch, I'll change the visibility, back to orange, back to gray. So that's how adjustment layers work in Photoshop. They go into your layers palette, they have their own thumbnail look, and let's take a look at levels real quick just so you can see the difference. I'm going to add one right above the glass dome. And here's the thumbnail for levels. And let's go ahead and make that glass dome nice and dark. And I'll clip it to that layer. And so it only applies to that glass dome layer. So this is what adjustment layers look like. They affect everything below them in your layer stack. And if you want to adjust just one layer, you can use it in a clipping group. Lastly, let's look at how that solid color adjustment layer works. It works a little bit different from the rest. Now, I use this a lot. Let's say that I'm going to go ahead and delete the two adjustment layers we got, and I'm going to make a new adjustment layer and do solid color. And this is a little bit different. What it does is gives me a solid color to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and clip it to the orange bottom so you can do it. So with that wide open white mask, you see it affects everything. Everything underneath it becomes that color. But it's best used as a clipping group. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Option, and I'm going to clip it with that orange bottom layer. So pretty cool. And the reason I like using solid color as an adjustment layer versus, let's say, filling that layer in with the color is that editability. I can go ahead and change my mind on the color. I can go in here and say, how about this color? Or how about that color? What would that look like if it was any of these colors? Do I like it? Do I want it less saturated? So I can go ahead and really change my mind, and I can sample from my image. So I've really got lots of options here. And then I can do something like, let's say, let's pick this color and then change the blending mode. So let's change this to color only. Looks great. So I hope that helps give you a quick orientation to how to use adjustment layers and which ones are really the most relevant for digital painters and illustrators. Check out the rest of our videos for getting up to speed in Photoshop, and keep making great art.